Why does it feel like we don't learn from our past mistakes? Why does it feel like the lessons we learn from past setbacks, misfortunes, the bad decisions and poor choices we've made are short-lived? Why does it seem like we easily forget the lessons we've learned from the things that we've done in the past? Why do we repeat? Why do we keep repeating unhealthy patterns even after we have experienced the consequences of our unhealthy behaviors from the past? It's easy to look at someone who's repeating unhealthy patterns, who keeps going back to an unhealthy behavior, who keeps going back to an unhealthy relationship, who keeps going back to, unhealthy environments, and assume that maybe they haven't learned from past experiences. The most convenient assumption when we look at people who keep making the same mistakes over and over is that they haven't learned enough. And yet we don't realize that even we ourselves, we do the same things but just differently. Because the number one reason for unhealthy patterns, the number one reason for the repetition of unhealthy patterns is simply unmet needs. The second reason is a dysregulated nervous system. If you walked into a hospital today, if you visited a friend, a relative, and or a family member who's admitted in hospital, you will probably notice that from the moment you walk into the hospital, you become health conscious. You start thinking and or talking about how you need to reduce your alcohol consumption and or even, completely stop. You start talking about how you want to stop smoking. You start talking about how you want to start exercising so that you can, maintain a healthy body. You start talking about how you want to stop chasing every beautiful girl you see in the street and or in the club. The reason for this is you have emotional access to the memory and the reality of the consequences of certain behaviors and or practices, and therefore you start sounding wise. You start sounding like you've become very conscious of your life. And yet a couple of hours after that moment, if we are to take you into a different place, you will notice that the conversations change and the thought processes change. Why is this? Why does this happen? And this is simply because the lessons from our poor choices do not expire, but we lose emotional access to them when conditions change. And so the moment you walk out of a hospital and you find yourself in a bar, you will probably notice that you forget about everything you saw at the hospital. And this is simply because a lot of times we only learn at an intellectual level. And so emotionally, we quickly dissociate, we quickly disconnect from the memory of those lessons. And so if we put you in a bar immediately after visiting the hospital, you'll probably notice that you will start drinking and smoking as if your liver is made out of steel. You start checking out all the girls in the bar. You start doing everything else that you said you are not going to do, almost as if you are not the same person who was at the hospital. What has changed? Number one, you have lost emotional access to the consequences of certain behaviors because the environment and conditions has changed. Number two, you are living with a dysregulated nervous system. And therefore, when we live with a dysregulated nervous system, we multiply consequences, we prioritize immediate gratification. And so when you walk out of a hospital and you walk into a bar, you will notice that in the bar, the primary responsibility is to be the guy that is buying the most expensive alcohol, the guy that is checking out every beautiful girl. Basically, you want to be seen as the alpha male in the bar. If you're a woman in the bar, you're the woman whom every man wants, and so you want to prove to everyone else that you're the most beautiful woman in that space. That's the primary need, to be seen as beautiful, to be seen as appealing. And so immediately you lose access to the lessons you learned at the hospital. Simply because, number one, the need has changed. The need at the hospital was for you to be healthy conscious, which is why you spoke as if you are very conscious of yourself. The need at the bar is to self-soothe. And so immediately you start identifying with opportunities to self-soothe. So overspending, buying alcohol, checking out every girl in the club, that's your way of self-soothing in the club. And so the lessons that you're supposed to be learning from the reality and the consequences of unhealthy patterns is quickly forgotten. And so the reason why we keep repeating unhealthy patterns, the reason why we keep going back to certain places, certain unhealthy places, is simply because the primary need has not been met, which is self-regulation. So your problem is not the repetition of unhealthy patterns. Your problem is you are living with a dysregulated nervous system, and therefore your needs change depending on environment and conditions. And so you are constantly changing, you are constantly shape-shifting so that you can fit into any environment that you find yourself in. And this is simply because you have not built a strong internal validation center. You don't know how to self-regulate, and therefore your needs are always informed by external conditions. And when those conditions change, it means you also have to find it in yourself to change so that you can become compatible with the new conditions and or environment. And so you continue to self-sabotage. You continue to do everything that you shouldn't be doing. You know exactly what happened the last time you did what you're doing. It didn't end well, but it's difficult to stop because the need has not been met. That's the reason why you keep gambling. The problem is not that you want to gamble. The problem is not you gambling. The problem is the primary need. The financial distress that you're living with is what's pushing you to gamble, because you're trying to solve the problem of poverty. And so you think that by gambling, eventually you will win and you'll be rich enough to not gamble. You will not need to gamble in the future. And unfortunately, you also tell yourself the lie that by next year, by next month, you would have done something right. You see, when we are dealing with immediate gratification, we have a tendency of pushing consequences into a future debt with the hope that there is something that we can do in between to avoid that consequence. So when you keep gambling, you are lying to yourself. You tell yourself that eventually you are going to win all the money that you have lost. So you're not focusing on your losses. You're not focusing on the lessons. You are focusing on the primary need, which is the need to eradicate poverty. You are telling yourself that I have to do something to get out of poverty. And if that means gambling, then that's what I'm going to do, because gambling seems like the most easiest way to get out of poverty. That's what you're telling yourself, because I'm only using 100 rand with the hope of winning 100 million, with the hope of winning 10 million, and therefore it feels convenient. It's something that I can do because I've tried everything else. I've tried working, I've tried whatever that other people have tried to do to get rich, and it's not working for me. For as long as the primary need is not met, it's difficult to stop and or change unhealthy patterns. For as long as you don't know how to self-regulate, it's difficult to change and or stop unhealthy patterns. A dysregulated nervous system multiplies consequences. A dysregulated nervous system multiplies consequences. A regulated nervous system multiplies alignment and good outcomes. It puts you in a position where good things continue to happen or keep happening for you. A dysregulated nervous system puts you in a position where everything bad keeps happening to you. So you keep going back to the same things over and over because the need has not been met. So if you have not healed from any of your traumas, it's going to be difficult for you to change your coping mechanisms. Simply because your primary responsibility is to protect yourself from the things that already happened, which is why you are hypervigilant, which is why you have trust issues, which is why you think everyone is out to get you, and therefore you don't trust people. You self-isolate out of the belief that if you put yourself out there, people are going to see through you. They are going to do something to you, to hurt you, or whatever it is that already happened to you. So your unhealthy patterns are the first sign that the need has not been met. And or if it's being met, it's being temporarily met And therefore, the moment you feel like, okay, the last time I did this, I was only happy for a couple of minutes. So you're convinced that the only way to keep, experiencing that happy moment or those happy feelings and emotions is to keep going back to that thing. Even though it also comes with more consequences than it's bringing you joy and happiness, than it's bringing you fulfillment. It's easy to suppress the memory of consequences when our needs have not been met. It's easy to ignore the consequences of our unhealthy patterns when the primary need is not being met. Nothing changes unless you change, unless you start self-regulating. And as difficult as that is, it's important that you start learning. Because as you begin to self-regulate, you start giving yourself closure. You start getting enough clarity. You start understanding why you've been doing certain things. And you start realizing that the primary need that you're chasing is a result of trauma, is as a result of trauma. It's not a healthy need. It's just something that you thought you needed or something that protected you at some point in the past. And now you have put so much priority on it. You've put so much relevance on it. So much so that anytime you don't feel like you have it, it could be the need for control. It could be the need for belonging that is pushing you to be a people pleaser, to be this person that is constantly trying to manipulate and control others. For as long as you don't understand that right now you don't have to force people to choose you, that you don't have to, buy love, to buy attention, to try and persuade people to see you. For as long as you don't understand that, you will notice that you will keep repeating those unhealthy behaviors and patterns, because these are the only behaviors that gives you access to the kind of result and reward that you're looking for. If you've watched and or listened from the beginning, this is where I pause and thank you for your love and support. Every like, every share, every follow matters. And so I'll ask you to share. I'll ask you to follow if you haven't followed me yet. I'll ask you to like and leave a comment in support of my work. Thank you so much. And I don't know if this applies to other social media apps, but I am going to pick a comment from YouTube that has the most likes. And I'm going to give you my book. I'll give away my book, Inspired Pain, to the comment with the most likes. And like I said, I don't know if this applies to other social media apps. If it does, I will pick one comment from every social media app where this video is posted. I'll be looking into the comments to see if there is any comment that has the most likes, and you'll get a free book from me. It's my book. It's my second book, Inspired Pain. It's now a bestseller. Once again, thank you so much for your love. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything that you've done in support of my work. And let's continue. You see, we don't see the repetition of unhealthy behaviors and or patterns as something that is wrong. We don't see it as something bad, but rather we see it as another opportunity at getting something right, at getting it right, and therefore we keep going back to it over and over, because number one, we are dysregulated, and number two, the need has not been met. And so when people are giving us advice, or when people are telling you that what you're doing is wrong, you don't listen to that. You don't hear that feedback from a place of consciousness and self-awareness. You hear that feedback through your wounds, through the lenses of your unmet needs. And so that feedback actually feels like criticism, judgment, and disappointment of some sort. So much so that you can easily be offended by the people that are trying to give you advice and or feedback, because even after they have given you advice and or feedback, the need is still there. The need is still not met, and therefore what you want is something that is going to help you meet your need. You're not looking for advice, and therefore you're not going to listen. You're not present to listen to people. Whatever it is that they think is right for you doesn't matter as long as it doesn't address the need that you have. The most tragedy thing that can happen to anyone is to live with the awareness of unmet needs. It almost feels like an unpaid debt, which you will go to any extent to get it paid. You will do whatever it takes to make sure that the debt is finally paid, even if it means repeating the same unhealthy behaviors, even if it means staying in the same unhealthy relationship. People actually stay in unhealthy relationships because the other person has hurt them, and it is their belief that it's the other person's responsibility to either heal them and or to either eventually admit that they have hurt them, so that they can get some closure, so that they can stop feeling like there's something wrong with them. And so we hold people hostage to the debt of unmet needs. We hold our parents hostage to the debt of unmet needs. The reason why too many people are struggling to heal from childhood traumas is simply because they think that it's their parents' responsibility to heal them, to finally apologize for everything they did. And therefore, when I talk to most of my clients about healing, a lot of them will outrightly say, but I didn't do this to myself. Why should I then try and heal? And yet they don't realize that as much as it's true that they didn't do that or they didn't hurt themselves, healing is their responsibility. And so we get stuck in this, the repetition of unhealthy behaviors. We get stuck in this cycle of unhealthy patterns because that primary need has not been met. Whatever it is that we think we need, whatever it is that we believe we should get, if we don't have it and if we are not getting it, then we don't stop doing what we've been doing. Even when there is no positive result and or outcome coming from those behaviors, coming from those choices, and whatever it is that we're trying to do. For as long as the primary need has not been met, there's a higher possibility that you will be stuck in the cycle of dysfunction. You will be stuck in the cycle of unhealthy patterns because you think and you believe and you're convinced that eventually you get it right, that eventually you will convince this person to love you, that eventually you will convince this person that they have hurt you, that you will prove to them that you're a good person, that you will prove to them that you are the best thing to ever happen to them. Eventually you believe that eventually you will prove to your bosses that you're an amazing employee. You believe that eventually you will convince your dad, you will convince your mother to love you better and differently. You're stuck in the loop. You're stuck in the cycle. Why? Because the awareness of the unmet need makes it difficult for you to stop. Because stopping means letting go of the pursuit of that need. It means you letting go of the pursuit and the belief that eventually you will get it right and that need will be met. So we get stuck in this cycle. If you talk to people that easily get angry as and when they're offended, they will tell you that they're trying harder to get people to understand them, to see them, to understand their point, to understand their perspective. It's not that they enjoy being angry. It's not that they enjoy being irritated. It's just that the awareness of the unmet need. They are tired of living and feeling like nobody understands them. They are tired of trying to convince people. And yet they don't know how to stop because they still want to convince people, because if they can convince people that there is nothing wrong with them, that their point is right and correct, that their opinion is right and correct, then they feel as if they have been, I had the word on top of my head. I'm gonna get it. Just give me a moment. They're trying to redeem themselves. They feel that if they can get people to understand them, then they can be exonerated from the shame. Yes, it's exoneration. Then they can be exonerated from the shame. They can be exonerated from the disappointment, from the feelings of rejection, the feelings of shame. And so anger sometimes is simply a shame coping mechanism. Being a people pleaser is a shame coping mechanism. Being a high achiever is a shame coping mechanism. Most of what we're trying to do, it's simply a shame coping mechanism. I spoke about gambling earlier on. It's a shame coping mechanism. You're tired of being poor and being at the bottom of the social hierarchy. And now you think that if you can gamble, if you can bet, whatever it is that you're doing, you think that it's a shorter way of becoming richer, so that eventually you can be respected, so that eventually people can start seeing you as an actual person who's deserving and worthy of respect, love, and everything else that you see other people experiencing and or receiving from other people. You're tired of always feeling like you're invisible. You walk in rooms where people don't look at you, where people don't see you, where your presence doesn't even move the people in those rooms. And now you think that maybe you can gamble your way into a place of being loved and respected. You're trying to promote yourself. You're staying in an unhealthy relationship because you think that there is something that you do right one day that will show the other person that you're a good person. And you think that you can love them enough into loving you back, into respecting you. The reason for this is because in as much as you are aware of the consequences of everything that you've been doing, the unfortunate thing is the consequences or the awareness of the consequences does not address the fact that your unmet needs still exist and that they have not been met. If the awareness of the consequences would help address our unmet needs, then maybe we would use the awareness of the consequences to say, oh, okay, because we know what usually happens when we do this, then we don't have to do it and automatically somehow our needs have been met. The unfortunate thing is the awareness of the consequences and the reality of our unmet needs can exist simultaneously, and unfortunately we will always prioritize our unmet needs. We do not focus on the consequences because the consequences does not help address the fact that we are living with unmet needs, and so we keep going back to the places and the things that creates this illusion or sells this false illusion and belief that maybe eventually we'll get it right and that our needs will eventually and finally be met. So we keep doing that over and over. We don't stop. And so the repetition of everything that you've been doing is simply in an attempt to get things right. But the primary reason why you keep doing that is simply because you are dysregulated. You are living with a dysregulated nervous system. There is no alignment. And so you don't know how to slow down. Because with all the history of everything that you've tried, all these attempts that have failed, surely by now you should have gotten enough clarity and closure. But remember, like what I said, closure doesn't matter when the need has not been met. Clarity doesn't matter when the need has not been met. I always say that death should give us clarity. But you see, in the face of death, clarity doesn't matter because that doesn't bring back the person we've lost. If I've lost a child, if I've lost a partner, if I've lost a parent, if I've lost a sibling, yes, I know that that tragedy is supposed to give me clarity about life. It's a moment of awareness where we can actually raise our consciousness and our awareness to the realization that we are not in control of life, actually, that there are certain things we should stop trying and surrender and just understand that in this life, no one gets out of it alive, that eventually this is the fate that awaits all of us. But unfortunately, in the face of death, we don't care about all that because what we want is to get back the person we have lost. We could have them back, and that's what hurts. And so clarity doesn't matter. We don't prioritize clarity in the face of death and grief. We prioritize the attempt to get back what we've lost. Why? Because in the face of death and grief, our nervous system is dysregulated. It falls apart. Okay, this has been long. Once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, for sharing, and for commenting. I will see you in the next episode. God bless you. And I hope it's been worth your time.